Call the special regular council meeting of April 29th to order. There's an agenda in front of you. Can I have a motion to adopt that agenda? Councillors Adie and Councillors Forster. Any additions or deletions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We do have a public comment time, but there are no members of the public in the gallery, and so we will move right on into reports. We have a report from and I should note as we start the meeting that Councillors Forrester and Randhawa are joining us remotely, as is Dr. Buchan. We have a report from the Manager of Communications, Engagement and Social Development with a request to declare May the 5th, 2024 National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and Two-Spirited People. There's a recommendation to that effect that Council declare May the 5th, 2024 National Day of Awareness for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls and Two-Spirited People. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Adie, Councillor Skelton-Morven. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We move on to a report from the Director of Operations, Intergovernmental Affairs. Recommendation that Council directs the Chief Financial Officer to execute the attestation letter associated with the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund award. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillors Niche and Skelton-Morven. Just so there's no doubt about what it is that we're doing here for the sake of the public, this is affirming to the federal government that we have the wherewithal to raise the other funds and complete the project that we've committed to. All right. Any discussion, questions? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. We have bylaw number 3529 with a recommendation that Council introduces and gives first, second, and third readings to the City of Prince Rupert 2024 5-year financial plan amendment bylaw number 3529-2024. Can I have a motion to that effect, please? Councillor Skelton-Morven and Councillor Forster. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Dr. Buchan, is there anything you want to lead off with here?
No, Your Worship. But perhaps Director Bombin would like to speak to this.
Director Bombin.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll be facing a few questions yet, but why don't you?
Sure. So just to recap, in December of 2023, Council approved and adopted the 2024 5-year financial plan. It was noted in December that a budget amendment would be forthcoming in the spring once estimates could be refined and the 2024 assessed values became available. So the attached financial plan amendment bylaw includes the incorporation of these changes, those that were approved by resolution already previously by Council since January up until as late as the beginning of April of this year. Also changes with relation to what's called MERCs, or mandatory employment related costs. We did a bit of shuffling between departments, just allocating some of the responsibilities to departments, but that didn't change anything on a net basis. And then obviously some updates to the infrastructure replacement project. So the attached summary outlines the changes by fund along with the reasons for 2024. The remaining 4 years of the 5-year financial plan have also been updated for changes to the expected funding and costs associated with the infrastructure replacement project. The bulk of the changes are within grant-funded projects. That's what should be noted mostly in this particular summary. As a result, the property tax increase proposed in the fall of 2023 has not changed and remains at 7.7%. There is an opportunity for public comment, and people can still contact us, finance@princerupert.ca. You can still contact your council, and we have posted information on the notice board, on our social media, and on our website. Feedback received will be provided to council to assist with the final consideration next week.
Excellent. Thank you. And I would note that one of the reasons we're having this meeting when we're having it is to meet all the timelines that are required. It may feel to people like this is the second increase in a year, but it's not. It's the same increase. We did the budget as Director Bauman laid out. We did the budget in December. It was based on a 7.7, but there's still some tweaking to do, and that's what was approved. And so now we come here having all the information, at least as much as a person can gather all at once, to present the final bylaw so that taxes can be sent out to people. All right, Councillor Cunningham.
With the announcement of the RBA now, some of the capital projects that were changed or shifted around or put on hold for a while and were not in the 5-year plan. Where are they? Like the stairs coming down from 4th to 3rd, the light where we told Peter to pay Paul for the roof, for things like that. I'd just like to get some answers on where those projects might be now that we know we're getting the RBA, because I can see we're counting on it for some projects already.
Yep. Dr. Buchan, did you want to comment on that?
Your Worship, I'll defer to Director Bauman.
Director Bauman.
Thank you. We did not receive any direction to incorporate the stairs specifically this year. And we do not know exactly how much we are getting with RBA just yet. So the items that we were previously, that had been approved, that we were funding out of some of what meager little reserves we had left that could be used for general capital items that were already approved, we have allocated at least that much from the RBA into those particular items so that we could keep those small meager reserves. So that was really just a shuffle. So in this case, what we've done is we've presented the capital items that were first going to be funded by the reserves, now being funded by the RBA. But the RBA is being brought in as a reserve item and then transferred back out. So of that, to be very clear, is that the amounts that were going to be funded by reserves for those few items of capital approved equipment items, that sort of thing, are being funded out of RBA. The rest of the RBA is not actually included in the budget because, again, we do not know how much it is.
So as I recall, just from reading through, it's about $1.8 million of the RBA is being brought into this budget.
That's correct. And part of that is actually going towards our water fund.
Okay. So so anticipating the next question, when I assume once we know how much we're getting from the RBA, when do we anticipate having that discussion as how that money gets allocated?
Yeah, so we anticipate that we will be having another budget amendment coming forward, specifically with respect to the RBA, once we know how much we are actually getting. So at that point, we will bring forward some recommendations, some options for council to consider.
Thank you. Councillor Cunningham.
One more step on the RBA. Now that we know the RBA is going to be there $50 million for 5 years, do individual cities have to pass that so that we can proceed before the next election and it gets lost in the shuffle?
So individuals, yes, individuals, communities, the agreement, the RBA agreement will be between the province and each local government. All 23 of them or whatever were involved in the RBA. I do not believe that we, when we're presented with our agreement, will need to wait for anybody else to sign. So it'll be presented to us. It'll come to council. Council, I assume, will approve it. We fought long enough to get it. I assume we'll approve it. And at that point in time, the next step can happen. We'll then know what the number is. We'll be able to have a dialogue around.
So there's no timeline on that as of yet?
No. It's now in the province's hands. The RBA has it's now in the province's hands. Yeah. All right. Anyone? Who's else? I'm looking around. I'm sure there's questions. Councillor Adey.
Thank you. I've got some specific questions about this document. I spent a rather intense last hour reading through it, and I have a general question in relation to that that I'll save for afterwards. So, with your indulgence, my first question is related to what Director Bauman had to say about public comment. I suppose my concern here is that if the public comment is to be brought to us at the time that we do fourth reading, and if fourth reading is going to take place against the wall of I think May 14th deadline, I'm not sure that gives us enough breathing room to respond effectively to whatever that public comment might be. I'm also not sure whether we've already heard, so I guess I can ask a preliminary question. What have we heard, if anything, so far? And I'll just, before I put that, I'll echo what Councillor Cunningham said about the 4th Avenue walkway, because that's what I've heard. Is where is that? So I think we're all hearing questions like that, and that particular project is just an example of the kinds of things that people have expressed a desire to see happen, and we're looking for ways to make that happen. So I guess my question is are we in a position to share anything we've already heard about the public comment, and how long will that window remain open for people who haven't commented yet?
All right, Dr. Buchan, without objection, I'll go to Director Bombin. And, the two pieces there, right? Have we had any comments? Secondly, if council wants to make any changes, we're on a tight timeline. How would that work?
Sure. So, no, we have not received any comments as of yet. And also, as far as the tight timeline, if there is anything, once we provide it next Monday, council can direct something else, and then we can take it back and then have another special meeting. So you would rescind third reading, direct the change, and then we would re-prepare the bylaw. You'd give it third reading, and at another special meeting, we still have all of next week after the Monday meeting to be able to incorporate the change if there's any that is required.
Thank you. Councillor Adey.
Okay, I'll carry on. I'm looking at some of the details. I'm now looking at the summary of changes for 2024 and some terminology, I guess, that I'd like a little bit of clarity on. It talks about proposed amendments. So, for example, the very first one, a specified grant, the existing approved budget was $0. The proposed amendment is $50,000. And then it's allocated to placemaking and transportation and safety. I guess I'm not quite clear on what a specified grant is. Does this mean that we've now got new grant money to provide that $50,000? I'm just not clear on where that comes from.
Again, Dr. Buchan, I'll go to Director Bombin.
Thank you.
Perhaps I'll explain this summary just a little bit more. Okay, so the first part of this page says approved incomplete projects from 2023 rolled over to 2024. So all of the funding that is listed there was already listed in 2023, was approved, but not all of the projects were actually completed by year end. It was anticipated when we were doing the budget that those projects were going to be completed. They were not, and therefore the request is, can we use the remaining part of the grants to finish up the project? It needs to be included in the budget. So that is the first part. The second part of the page is previously approved by resolution. So these were the ones that were approved by council in the first quarter of 2024. They are now included in the budget. The following page lists the additions to the budget and changes in estimates. The largest one of note was the previously mentioned RBA. And then the remainder of the page, so it basically talks about this is where the funding is coming in, and then this is how it's being spent. As you can see, it's an in and an out. Again, the majority of it was the RBA. There's some smaller items, such as a little bit of an increase in the bus shelter program. We need to do some aggregation of data collection for the Next Generation 911, of which we do have a grant for, so it will be completely funded. We received another grant for Indigenous cultural safety, so that needs to be included. It essentially is saying this is how much money we are getting in grant funding, and we need approval to go ahead and spend it, included in the budget. The other one is that we've received non-market change of approximately $700,000. And this was used to replace the firefighters' SCBA equipment for the most part. And the bulk of it was with relation to the previously mentioned mandatory employment related costs and some revisions in some of the estimates. So that eats all of that up. And there is a parking reserve allocation. This is for the purchase of a lot potentially for downtown parking. We need approval in order to be able to make that purchase if it were to happen. And finally, there was the equipment loan for the pumper truck. We won't need to be taking that because the pumper truck is still not going to be delivered in 2024. So it will be delayed to 2025. It will make up a part of the 5-year financial plan in 2025. The following page is with respect to the water fund and the water utility. Essentially, this change just identifies that we are doing less of the infrastructure replacement project than we initially anticipated in December when we first started budgeting in October, to be fair. So now that we were already into the beginning of May and we have not started digging up the roads as earnestly as we optimistically thought. So now we need to make a small revision on that. All it means is that we're postponing it to future years because that project is still a multi-year project. The following page identifies the same types of changes for the sanitary and storm sewer. Again, we have not begun in quite as much earnest, but it is coming. There's a little bit of planning that needed to happen once we found out that we had received the funding from the feds. And then the bottom of the page is with respect to the solid waste utility. We have to close the landfill cell that is no longer in operation because we've opened the new cell. The cost of closure is higher than we expected. And so this proposes using the Northern Capital Planning Grant, the Community Works Fund, and the remainder of the landfill closure accrual to be able to do that. So we need approval to do it. It is mandated, it is a requirement, but we still need it included in the budget. And that concludes the summary.
Just before I let Councillor Adie continue, you used a term that not everybody would be familiar with, and that's non-market adjustment.
Non-market changes can be positive or negative. When they are negative, it is generally when we have lost something as a result of something that the market did not do, and that is typically fire. So that typically will remove an asset from the tax base. The opposite is true when there is something built. So when there is new houses that are on the tax roll, that increases our tax base, but it's new taxes. Somebody is new here. In this particular case, the majority of this non-market change was in respect of projects on Ridley Island, mostly with respect to Trigon. So there was some non-market change there, and that makes up the bulk of this one. So that's what the positive non-market change is.
Thank you. Councillor Ady.
Thank you. I'll carry on. Back to the page that I was on. First of all, I appreciate the information and the additional understanding that I've gotten about some of this. There is a reference there to the Leicester Centre roof, and that we still have a pending grant application of $317,000. So if it's still pending, obviously we haven't either received it or not received it. I'm just wondering if there's an update on when we might know.
Has anyone got an update on the grant from the Leicester Centre or from the PRPA? Director Bauman.
We anticipate that we will be hearing shortly.
There you go.
I'm sure that we share that anticipation with many other community groups. You've partly answered the question. I'll just make sure that I understand it correctly. When I looked at the section on the utility funds and all of the red ink items, which are essentially deferments into the future because we're not going to draw on that cost this year. My understanding now is, based on what I've heard, is that most of that is within the umbrella of the federal and provincial grant monies that we've received. So it's not actually a change in the regular operating funds of the utilities.
Correct.
So could I anticipate then that will have no impact one way or another on an anticipated change in what taxpayers are likely to pay for their utility funds?
Director Bauman.
Yeah, it's not going to impact utility fees this year. This year's utility fees were already in a bylaw, and they've already been levied. Any potential impacts? Well, this bylaw actually for water and sewer and solid waste ends in 2024. So there will be utility bylaw rates coming forward this year. How much of an increase there actually is, specifically with sewer, since we have sought and received approval for the $40 million in borrowing. Depending on how much we draw down on that borrowing in each of the next few years to conduct the works that are our proportionate share of the project, will really depend on will dictate just how much of the increases in the sewer rates will happen. But no, none of what is actually in here is going to be increasing utility rates for this year.
Councillor.
Okay, my next question is about the municipal debt. And there's a number there, $3.5 million to pay interest and principal on municipal debt. And I know I've asked questions about this in the past. I'm wondering whether this reflects the loan that's referred to in the attestation letter that we just dealt with. Is that kind of folded into that? And if it isn't folded into it yet, do we have a sense of the anticipated impact of that? Our portion being whatever the $45 million that we're borrowing to support the water project.
Director Bauman.
Thank you. So the $3.5 million is what is actually going to be spent in this year in total. It's the repayments. It does not reflect the attestation letter. The attestation letter says that we will fund that difference by any means possible. If borrowing is contemplated, we will need to come forward with a new borrowing bylaw for that particular portion. At the moment, we don't anticipate that we're going to have to borrow for it. So no, the attestation letter is not included in this particular bylaw.
Councillor Ady.
I'm fervently hopeful that we can continue anticipating that. My last of the specific questions, could you explain the interfund borrowing and how it relates to my understanding that utilities are meant to be self-funding? And if I'm reading it, I'm not sure whether that means there's money going from one to another. And does that fit the definition of self-funding?
Director Bombin.
Yeah, and that is a good question. In 2023, we brought forward a 2023 budget amendment bylaw, whereby we borrowed the interest from the $65 million that we had received from the province in order to pay for much of the water breaks that we had. But we also needed, because we didn't have enough interest, we also needed to borrow from our land acquisition and disposal reserve fund. It was noted at that time that it was being borrowed to fund the overage in 2023, and that in 2024 we would be repaying it with the interest earned on the monies so far to date in from the province's money. And then we've repaid the land acquisition and disposal reserve fund, and that's what's contemplated in this bylaw. So we are doing exactly what we said we would do when we brought forward the 2023 budget amendment.
Councillor Adey.
Yeah, thanks. So my last, maybe it's a comment, maybe it's a question. I found myself challenged to feel that I could go through this material in time to talk about it intelligently. And so I wonder about the timing of this meeting and whether there is a way for us to spread this process out a little bit more. So we're here in a special meeting, and I hear that if there was to be any significant changes as a result of public feedback and so on, that we would then anticipate next Monday, that would require another special meeting. And I think the public could be forgiven for questioning why this has to be done in this particular way. We do have from time to time special meetings, but quite often they're intended to do, I don't want to use, well, I'll use it anyway, to rubber stamp things that are just routine that we need to do, and there's timelines involved. This is not necessarily of that nature. This is a little more central to the decision making that we have to do. So I guess I'm feeling like we need to give ourselves. We have a May 14th deadline for the final fourth reading and send it off to the province and all that. I feel like we need to give ourselves a second deadline a little further back to allow this process to breathe. So that's I guess that's a comment, and I realize we're not there now. We are here now, and we're doing this now, and that's not going to change what we now have to do in the next couple of weeks. But I would very much like to see this process acquire a little more space for consideration than we have now.
I think that's an absolutely fair comment, Councillor. And maybe I'm going to turn Dr. Buchan to you first, but maybe there can be some commentary just in terms of why it is we're here, not quite at the 11th hour, but late. And I'll defer to you to.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I hear the question loud and clear. I will ask Dr. Bombin to speak to the challenges in that she faced in getting the information to you at this stage, and the prospect for moving it earlier for next year.
Director Bombin.
Thank you. Maybe I'll just recap a little bit that last year we changed our budget process to begin in the fall. So because of that, we had to make quite a few estimates beyond what we would normally do when we present the budget at the beginning to middle of March in the current year. And this was to provide staff with the approval essentially, to be able to go ahead and start conducting business January 1st. It's not uncommon. It's just, it's not something that we're used to here. So this is our first go around. I will, though, remind Council that even in the past, although we have provided the budget at the beginning of March, maybe at the very, very last meeting of February, maybe the middle of March, there is still things that are still in flux, and we always have to wait until the end of March for the final assessed values to come from BC Assessment. We always have to wait until about the middle of April for the province to provide us with what the actual Port Property Tax Act impacts on our budget is, and we never get it any earlier. And we always end up with a special meeting at the end of April in order to do 3 readings, to get direction from Council and 3 readings on the budget bylaw. And then we are always at the beginning meeting of May bringing forward an adoption.
Thank you. In other words, a lot of time pressure. Yeah. Councillor Adey.
I appreciate that, and you know, I mean, yeah, we are in fact all trying to check the boxes and get through the process as well as best we can. It sounds like one of the places that we might benefit from a change is in the timeline that the provincial government provides us with information about the Port Property Tax Act, tax money. I don't know whether they could be lobbied to shift that a little bit to give us more time to do this. I don't know whether there's any room for flexibility in the rest of what you said, but that would be my hope, is that we can find some room to move there.
Director Bauman.
I would love to receive the information a whole lot earlier, but they also have to wait for the revised rolls from BC Assessment, and the end is the last day of March. So once they get that final information, then they finally start doing their calculations. Maybe I'll offer this much. While we were been doing this, we do recognize that there was quite a few changes that you needed to review this particular time. So we were considering that this fall, what we would do is, instead of adopting the bylaw, we would take it to 3rd reading, and then as we progress through, as we start doing some of the budget resolutions to include, we would essentially rescind 3rd reading, give 3rd reading. But I think because of the fact that we're still waiting for the province, we're still very much going to end up probably in the same situation.
It does sound like there might be something we can do politically just to put a little pressure on. Even a week would be good. Dr. Buchan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think Director Bauman's described well the challenges in doing anything faster, but I do want to say that Director Bauman's new timeline with doing the budget towards the end of last year deals with probably 95% of the deliberation and information sharing. So you know, staff have advanced the vast majority of this discussion to a far earlier time frame. It's really you know, some fine tuning around the edges with a little more information that comes in late. That is advanced to this stage, and so you know, I think that you know, the intent behind the question is you know, significantly being addressed already.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments or questions from council? All in favor? Any opposed? I see no opposed. It is carried. Thank you very much. I want to just make a comment. The nature of our questions could make a staff person feel like we don't appreciate the work that's being done. I can speak, I think, very strongly for all of council. We are very well served, Director Bauman, by you and your department. And You make things incredibly clear, and where we don't understand, you then clarify even further. And so it's a monumental task with all kinds of pressures and timelines. And so I want to express our sincere gratitude to you and all the people that work with you. Thank you.
On behalf of my staff, thank you.
All right. Now I've lost my place in the agenda. All right. I think that takes us to. Oh no, we got to do the tax bylaw now. We are looking at tax bylaw number 3530. Recommendation that council introduces and gives first, second, and third readings to the City of Prince Rupert 2024 property tax bylaw 3530. Can I have a motion to that effect? Councillor Niche and Councillor Skelton Morvan. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? It is carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Any reports, questions, inquiries from council? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Skelton Morvan, Councillor Niche, all in favor? Any opposed? It is carried. Meeting adjourned.